So first of all, welcome to everybody. I see a lot of familiar faces and some new ones. I'm Sal, I'm the president of the school. And we're thrilled that you could join us and really delighted that Esa-Pekka Salonen could make time to be here this morning. And we have Ross Collins, one of our conducting fellows at the school here. We are now in the second year, extraordinary year, of the Negaunee conducting program at the Colburn School. That really is the vision of Esa-Pekka Salonen. He and I started conversations, maybe almost a decade ago, about the idea of a very small, highly selective program for young, gifted conductors, very much a pre-professional program. And we welcomed our first class of 2 conductors last fall of 19. Ross is with us today. Ross, are you in Finland at present?
Yes. Hi, good morning from me too. I am currently in Finland, so it might be 10 a.m. for you. It's 8 p.m. for me.
I see. And probably it's been dark since about, what, 3 o'clock?
I mean, it's pretty much constantly dark over here these times, but yeah, it gets dark around 3 p.m.
It's been dark since December 1st. Welcome. Now, teaching conducting is different from teaching almost any other musical discipline, in the sense that you can't practice on your instrument like an instrumentalist can, or a singer can practice, obviously, anywhere and anytime. Conducting, we conductors, we are completely dependent on other musicians to produce the sound for us, and therefore practicing is a complex issue. My friend and colleague Zubin Mehta once said that we practice publicly for a few decades, and then we know what we're doing. It was an extreme point of view, but rang true. So conducting, of course, as in any musical discipline, but especially conducting, what you see and hear in a concert is just the tip of the iceberg. Most of the work has been done in rehearsals. Preceding the rehearsals is sometimes a lengthy preparation period for the conductor himself or herself. And in some cases, the performance is a result of decades of studying the same score, developing the concept further based on practical experiences with musicians and performances and so on. I think learning a long late romantic symphony, such as a symphony by Mahler or Bruckner, something like that, takes, for most people, hundreds of hours, if not thousands, and repeated performances, coming back to the score, reanalyzing everything, doing it again, reanalyzing everything, trying to kind of improve things that were not satisfactory and so on. So it's a process that, this is an awful cliche, but it's a lifelong learning process, more than perhaps in the case of being an instrumentalist. You know, some people, instrumentalists, have played amazingly well at the age of 18 or something like that. If you look at the young Itzhak Perlman or Heifetz at any age, or Yo-Yo Ma, any of these people, at the age of 18, they were fully grown artists in a way. I mean, their art and point of view has obviously developed and changed over the years, but what they could do then was already at the very highest level of music making. with conducting, it's rarely the case that you could kind of actualize your thoughts and your feelings and your concept at a very early age, because conducting, apart from being a sort of a physical thing, i.e., making gestures to convey something to the orchestra and so on, it's also about how to work with people, how to find a way to get through, how to find a way to inspire, how to find a way to listen, which is perhaps the most important part of, I would say, any leadership position, but conducting especially, because listening actively creates a feedback loop, I like to call it, that you hear something and that information influences the next thing you do in terms of gestures, and this is mostly an intuitive process, but not always. And over the years, you hone this mechanism, the ear-hand connection, so that it becomes completely intuitive, completely almost automatic. And then you get to a point where you feel free, so that music just happens. You think of something, and that thing is kind of happening mysteriously in front of your ears and eyes. So it's very different. Teaching conducting is very different from other disciplines, as I said. And as we know, actual physical conducting in front of actual real musicians doesn't happen much these days. So we unfortunately don't have that privilege at the moment, that we would have an actual conducting session. But already from the days when I was a conducting student, video capture has been a very important tool in this. My teacher, and also Ross's teacher, at times Ross's teacher, Jorma Panula, Finnish dean of conductors, who just turned 90, by the way, and he's frightfully energetic and active, and treats his former students, who are now grown-ups, shall we say, still with a certain degree of contempt, which we love, of course. There was an event last summer in a Finnish village of Fiskars. You might have heard about it, because they are the very center of industrial design in Finland. And those orange scissors you might have seen, which are very good to hold, they are called Fiskars, and they are made in that village, basically. So there was a 90th birthday celebration for Jorma Panula, and many of his old students from 3 different conductor generations were there, and we did a concert together for him, and then there was a sort of globally streamed question and answer session after the show, and the moderator asked Mr. Panula, so what do you feel when you watch your former students of all ages conducting in front of you? How does that make you feel? And he said, well, yeah, they seem professional. Then there was a long pause, and then he said, almost. And in most other situations one would have been a little annoyed, like me having done this professionally for 40 years or something like that. However, we all felt such warmth coming towards this man. Anyway, just felt good. It's like when your mother gives you a hard time at the age of 92, like mine, it feels good. And I'd be deeply worried if that stopped somehow. So what we did then and what we will do now is to analyze videos of rehearsal sessions or concerts. Rehearsals are most telling, more so than concerts, because that's where the work has been done by and large. And the nice thing about the video, unlike live, is that you can stop and rewind. That's a very useful thing. I wish I had that in real life also, but there it is. So today, Ross is going to show a video from the northern Karelian city of Joensuu, where he went and did a gig with Jorma Panula and some other people, and he's conducting the Seventh Symphony of Sibelius, which is one of the greatest pieces from the last century. A completely new take on the symphonic form. A shortish piece, it's 20-some minutes, where all the sort of elements and characters of a normal symphony, i.e. the main movement, the slow movements, the scherzo and the finale, they fuse together, but not in a mechanical sense. They fuse together almost through some kind of genetic manipulation, so this thing that grows is a plant that contains all these elements, and it should sound like that. Some kind of thing miraculously morphing from one thing to another and so on. So Ross, could you tell a little more about the occasion? What was it where this all was recorded?
So the video you'll see today is of me conducting the Joensuu City Orchestra, which was about a week ago, maybe almost 2 weeks ago. And because the whole of Finland is starting to go more into lockdown now. So it was a bit of a miracle that we were able to organize, or that Joensuu was able to organize this period with like real players. And like the concert was streamed. So there was no live audience, but we managed to have up to, I think, 40 people in the same room, which feels a bit weird in today's situation.
I just got a text message from Christian Zimmerman, the Polish pianist who is a very, very good friend of mine. And he texted that, so according to the latest laws, we are allowed to celebrate Christmas with 10 people without any problems. And then there was a second text. So where do we find those 10 people without problems? The other side of the lockdown. So in the very beginning, when the video starts, Ross introduces himself to the orchestra and in Finnish, and then he switches to English, which is quite often the case in Finland these days, because there are so many foreign musicians in the Finnish orchestras. And then there's a booming voice from the back of the hall, which is Mr. Panula saying that, speak Finnish. They understand Finnish. So therefore the language of interaction on this video is Finnish. So we will translate when necessary.
And just for the record, I was told by the concert master that not all of them did speak Finnish. So I was kind of bouncing in and between Finnish and English when necessary. So, right. I'll get to share the video. Can you see this?
Yeah.
All right, great. And let me know if the sound is all right. Yes?
It sounds really loud here, at least. Did you feel the same? Can you take the volume down a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
Moikka! Hyvää huomenta. Mun nimi on Ross. Mä oon Helsingistä. Mä oon myös puoliksi englantilainen. Joitakin juttuja saattaa tulla in English. So I also heard that some of you are English. So anyway, I'm really happy to be here. Let's go from the top of Spare Assembly. Mutta suomia vissi ymmärtää kaikki.
Excuse me?
Go ahead. Sorry. Let's stop here.
All right.
Okay, that's great. So Mr. Pano was shouting, it goes in 3 from the back of the hall. So this is right this moment when the chorale starts. Some conductors conducted in 6, some conductors conducted in 3. I think it works better in 3, but you know, it's a matter of opinion and taste and so on. Ross, that's nice. I had a few observations from the beginning.
All right.
So first of all, was the first beat. This is going to be a long session, people. So the first beat, there's only one timpani playing. So you don't need a click on that upbeat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because sometimes, you know, in conducting, the most important thing in the sort of gesticular language of conducting is the upbeat, which is basically just when the hand goes up before it comes down. And that is supposed to indicate not only the speed and dynamic of the following event, whatever it is, somebody's playing most likely, um, but also the character of it, and in some case we try to indicate the kind of sound we want during that split second. And there are moments when you have to have a very sort of clicky upbeat in order to make sure that the following beat is together in the orchestra and so on. Sometimes it's enough to just lift it and go. And I quite often compare the perfect upbeat with an object in free fall. That meaning that there's one constant that we all share, all living things on the planet, which is the acceleration of free fall, which is the 9 point something meters per second to the second power. I.e., it's a similar thing to throwing an apple up, and then when the apple lands back on your palm, that's the moment when the event happens. Because everybody, every living thing with eyes can anticipate the moment, because we know instinctively. So the hand should behave like an object which is free in space, in certain moments, not always, obviously, but in terms of the indicating precisely when to start. Now, Ross understood straight away what I meant by saying that here he doesn't need a click on the upbeat, because it's only one timpani player playing on the downbeat. Then, however, what I would like to see is more weight and kind of traction in the hand when the cellos and basses start playing the ascending A minor scale. And then when you come to the E flat, I haven't got the score here, so I don't have the bar number of it or anything, but the E flat minor chord, which is the third bar, is it? So,
yeah, third bar.
So that is very treacherous for even musicians who know this piece very well, because instruments are coming in between the beats, and there's no real pulse. It's just like a so gigantic gesture that grows. So a downbeat, very clear, is very helpful for the musicians. And the oboe player was a bit early, for instance, in this version, in I think the fourth bar. And then when there's this crescendo on the B flat, going down to an A, so that I would like you to sort of indicate there should be more tension on it.
All right.
And the real culmination of the phrase is when the violas leave their B natural and land on the F major, which happens like two beats after the upper strings have already changed to the A natural. And this is a very typical tool, stylistic compositional tool for the late Sibelius. Late meaning Sibelius in his 50s. He lived a long life, but it kind of became late when he was in his 50s. This lateness is a very strange concept anyway, says a man who is 62 years old. I don't feel late in any way at all. Yeah, and when you kind of look at the late music by composers like late Mozart, he was 35 for God's sake, and he was certainly not late in his opinion. He just had bad luck. But so this kind of wisdom of late works is kind of an after construction, because the composers themselves were not quite sure, or in many cases in complete denial, or didn't even know that these were late works. Anyway, late Sibelius uses this often as a tool where there are two layers and there's a modulation happening or a chordal change. So he kind of fuses that in such a way that it doesn't happen simultaneously. So one instrumental group modulates before another, and so the whole thing becomes again like a growth, natural growth thing. Very much a metaphor of DNA, plants. Then one more thing, Ross, when the bassoons and the flutes play the 16ths, dee da da dee da 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 dee da da, all that. It was not together, and I think the reason was that the two beats preceding the 16ths of yours were slightly faster than the tempo where you actually wanted the 16ths to be played. So those two beats before have to be exact. You have to kind of hear the 16ths in your head during those two beats. Then it will be automatically together. Believe me, I've been there. And to coordinate the second bassoon with the flute is not always simple because of the distance between them, even in normal situations. So let's watch this beginning one more time, and I can point out those moments where I can yell something like Mr. Panola does. So Ross, if you could just take it from the top of the symphony.
All right. I have a quick question.
Sure.
Just to start, the timpani thing, the pagadam, would you see that more as just like a mysterious, like slide in, like welcoming to the Sibelius 7, or should it be more like more heard? Because I felt that he was playing quite quietly and quite softly, and Sibelius writes an accent on it, so I guess that's where I kind of got the feeling to do like this kind of huge click on the upbeat, which kind of threw it off.
Yeah, I think it should be clear.
Okay.
Because had he wanted to write something mysterious, he wouldn't have written. Okay. Then it would have been a tremolo or something. So I think it's a signal. Okay, we're in the middle of something, and then the world's simplest thing follows, the on the surface simplest thing, a modal scale rising, which is technically A minor, but it's not simple because it's syncopated. The basses and cellos are not in sync. They are in a phase separated by an eighth note. So if you listen to that scale, it actually has, again, like a natural metaphor. It's like a stream. So it's not clearly defined. It's something that clearly rises, but it's not like a pulse or anything like that. It's just a thing. And then he chooses the remotest key from the scale. If we think of the scale as A minor, the remotest minor key is E flat minor, and he chooses that chord. So that the surprise happens in the third measure already. Okay, let's do it. here. I would like more slowness in the beat and like because you conduct it like it's all fine, but in my opinion, it doesn't convey the feeling of this sort of inevitability, like a very heavy thing rising from the depths of the sea, and finally it's fully visible, like some kind of a mythical beast from the ocean, a kraken. It's a term used these days, unfortunately, and then when it's fully visible, it lands on this E flat minor, and that already should be like the most shocking moment in your life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on.
I'll keep the Kraken in mind next time.
This so the whole thing should be like one gesture from the depths to that chord, and then they're free. It's like something coming out of a bag or a cage, or a more mundanely like a toothpaste. No, ketchup. Those moments, remember when trying to get something out of a ketchup bottle, nothing comes out, and then you shake, and then you shake more, and all of a sudden it's like, brrr, and it's all on your shirt. But that kind of feel that it's just struggling, and then it's there, and then we're in a different world, like going through the membrane between two universes. Something like that. Can you just do the start one more time?
Sure.
We'll continue. Very clear here. So the oboe changes not one beat. So the violas, they need to know when to stop the downbeat. Yeah, da, right.
All right.
Because they have a quarter note. They do, right? Sorry.
Yeah, it's quarter note and then a quarter rest.
Yeah. So you need to indicate where it goes. That kind of thing. And also when the B natural emerges out of the C bar earlier, you should really take care of the placement of the eighth note. So that everything that happens in this interaction is a bigger deal. So it's not like
more of that deep Finnish passion.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just more like, appreciating every moment of this incredible thing.
Yeah.
I think Sibelius is at the highest level of his composing right here, ever. There are moments in the symphony which don't work as well as my opinion, because sometimes the textures in this piece are very thick and kind of, they need a lot of work from the conductor to clarify them. But this introduction is amazing, and I think one should try to squeeze every bit of juice out of it, because that's what we do. You know, it's only notes, that's the material, and then that's the Play-Doh, okay? And then we make little figures from the Play-Doh. Anyway, let's carry on.
All right.
What is the dynamic in this bar when the new section starts?
When the winds start descending and the strings are ascending. It's mezzo piano.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
So if I watched you, I would have felt mezzo forte at least. Yeah. Because then it grows. But if you start flapping like this in the beginning of the phrase, physically you have nowhere to go unless you want to start like flying or something. So start smaller. Start smaller, and then, you know, gradually when the phrase progresses, you can you know, make the gestures bigger. Okay. Otherwise, very nice. Carry on. That start of the tremolo. Yeah. What's the idea dynamically there? What are you doing?
It's the bar before it. It's a diminuendo from mezzo piano. Then it's louder and mezzo forte. But I wanted to give it just like a little bit of weight. And later on in the rehearsal, I asked for it, and then I was satisfied with it. But then just a little bit of weight on the.
So you mean more like a sforzando and then followed by a piano, or
just a little bit like on the start to give it that kind of, you know, the mist of the Kraken kind of.
Okay, but are they backing off dynamically after they hit the tremolo, or
yeah, I'd say so, yes. Yeah,
that makes perfect sense. So you have to define how long the weight is. I mean the sforzando. So is it like wah, or is it like wah, that kind of thing, or anything in between? And that can come out of the hands also.
Okay.
So if the hand has enough slowness, you know, the slowness is actually the most difficult thing to master in the technique of conducting, and which has to do with, to move your hand slowly is not difficult, but to trust yourself enough that a slow movement means something, that you can control things with very slow movements. That takes some experience. You just have to do. It's like I guess swimming. So if you don't believe that you can float, you will not. So it's a sort of a. But you know that I like it quite slow. That, wow, that kind of feel, and then that can come out of the hands, so you don't have to say anything. You know, the goal here is to not to say anything, which is not what I'm doing. But the less you speak in rehearsals, the better it works, because people can sense things. They sense them in an organic way, and that's why it kind of sticks to the memory better than a verbal explanation of something. And our teacher, Mr. Panula, said back in the day that you can say 3 things back to back, but don't say a 4th thing, because they don't remember that. They switch off after 3 things. That was his rule of thumb. So I've tried to stick to that later in life. Okay, let's carry on. It's a good job. So that's great. As you heard, the orchestra was a bit confused because some people tried to play the slow parts in 6 and some people played in 3. That was not Ross's fault. But
before this, just before this, Jorma Panula had run the whole thing through.
Oh yeah.
So then this is the first day rehearsals, and it wasn't quite the part where it changes in the 3. It didn't feel it didn't sit well. So I got back to that later.
Yeah, and my feeling was that the second beat in that transition doesn't have to go in tempo. It needs a little breath before the chorale starts. The chorale starts on the second beat of the bar. But if you go in tempo to the chorale, somehow it's like a great actor delivering a monologue. You know, there must be, before the sort of main statement of the monologue, there has to be a little moment, like, and then, so you can't just go from one sentence to another. This is not written in the score, but I think it should be. It just feels that we lose a great moment when it just goes straight into the next thing. Thank you, Ross. That's great stuff.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to say before there are any questions, I mean, first of all, it's fascinating insight into the level of detail, but also I thought maybe Esa-Pekka, one of the extraordinary things about the program that you've created at Colburn is the ability for the conducting fellows to have this professional experience with orchestras and to travel to a certain degree with you. I know you spent some time with Ross in Finland this summer recently, right? Or this fall?
Yes, yeah, and in Germany as well.
So that's a very unique, unprecedented part of the program, that these conducting fellows have the opportunity to actually have real world experience while they're still students. So, but yes, any questions, of course.
Yes, I have.
No, we.
Yep. Hi.
Hi, Seth here, guest of Diane. How do you assess the temperament of an orchestra if you're a guest conductor? Because you only have a limited experience with them when you go into a 1 session or a 2 session piece with them.
Well, I guess, at least when I think back to my youth, when every orchestra was new, it was the same mechanism as there is between people. Like when you meet someone for the first time in your life, quite often there's a gut feeling. It can be, okay, this person is going to be a constructive, great influence in my life for the rest of my days, or all the flags go up. Stay away from this person. You know, we all have had these experiences, and in most cases they're very, very precise and accurate. And with orchestras, my experience was then very much like that. You know, I stepped in front of an orchestra, and it just felt natural somehow. What I did created the kind of response that I was expecting to hear, and people were nice and, you know, and laughed at my jokes, which is a very important part of this business. Dangerous though, and so on. And then I went with this exactly the same repertoire to the next place, and nothing worked. It was like everything just felt wrong, against the grain somehow, and the results were not good. Now, of course, with decades of experience and having conducted, like, I don't know how many thousands of concerts and how many hundreds of orchestras, I can, first of all, I don't have to go back to those orchestras where I didn't feel well. But in some cases, I have gone back after, say, 20 years. And of course, you know, I'm in a different place. And you know, if there's something that bothered me, then it's something that I can now overcome if it's still there, or I can just kind of crush it, which is more difficult for a young person. Or in most cases, you know, what seemed to be the problem has gone away on its own. I really don't know how to explain this, but temperamentally, every orchestra is different, and you would be surprised to know how different they are, even on the very, very top level. Like, the Vienna Phil versus the Berlin Phil versus the Chicago Symphony versus the LA Philharmonic versus the Philharmonic Orchestra. The same thing comes out differently, and I still don't quite know what the mechanism is. It's because it's a complex thing. Like everything is complex between people, but when you have a group of 80, then it becomes really complex, and it's very hard to analyze it. But it's a fascinating thing, and many of those orchestras I conducted as a young man in my 20s, and where I felt really good, became my, I would say, lifelong colleagues and partners in this. I had this experience with the Philharmonia in London in my mid-20s, and then I came to LA. I guess I was 26 or something, and I felt the same thing. With the LA Phil, in the first rehearsal, I felt, okay, I know this with some, or actually maximum certainty. I felt that this group of people is going to be a major part of my musical life forever, and I wasn't wrong. And then I had some experiences that were different, and in some cases downright unpleasant, and that has always kind of stayed that way. So the short answer to your question is, we're all people, and we react to each other in many ways, but the intuitive level is maybe the most important one, and the most precise instrument in a way. And we all know this from our own lives.
Thank you.
Pekka, there's a good question in our chat, which asks how you approach conducting contemporary music where no one has played the work before, like world premieres, and maybe perhaps particularly your own new music.
Okay, so basically I don't approach new music any differently from old music. Of course, the difference in preparation is the freedom, because you don't have the YouTube versions of Weingarten and Vittorio de Sabata available of the same work. So in a way, conducting a brand new piece with no history whatsoever is liberating, because you're the leading authority on that in the world at that very moment. So you cannot be contested. There can't be any opinions about your conducting in the same way. To conduct my own music for the first time is the scariest experience. Because, first of all, the first rehearsal of a new orchestra piece is always kind of dreadful. My teacher, Rautovara, first composition teacher, Rautovara, said, well, never go to the first rehearsal. I said, in my case, it's kind of difficult to avoid because I'm often conducting them. He said, oh, yeah, right. But in that case, don't go sober. Which is also bad advice. Ross, bad. So by this, he meant that things that sound pretty awful in the first rehearsal are not necessarily your faults as a composer. It's just the fact that even when a group of very good musicians read something for the first time, they don't have an intuitive understanding of what is what things go together, and even if they play the notes perfectly, they don't know how the bits and pieces hang together. What is the foreground? What is the background? What's the expression? What is the composer trying to say? This and that. So, and quite often these problems solve themselves miraculously overnight, that the second day they come back to the same material. their ears already kind of pick up the important things. But I must say that conducting my own music in the first rehearsal is kind of daunting, because I'm used to it, obviously. But it's daunting because I have to make these split-second decisions whether, if something doesn't come out right, i.e. the way I imagined it, I have to make these split-second assessments whether it's me as a composer who has made a mistake, or whether it's me as a conductor who can't conduct this passage very well, or whether it's the orchestra still struggling with the material, or whether it's a combination of the three, or whether it's actually good, but it just needs a day more. And now I'm experienced enough not to panic and not to start changing things willy-nilly in the first rehearsal, because I want to wait until the musicians have had time to go. But yeah, music is music, no matter what the period is, no matter, I mean, it's always, when dealing with dead composers, as we do most of the time, there's a lot of guesswork in terms of the intention of the composer. But then again, I think that's a good thing. If somebody wanted to play a piece of mine still, like say 100 years after I'm gone, I would much rather see that person approach it from her perspective and from her cultural framework, and trying to play the piece the way she would have imagined it from that moment in history, rather than trying to reimagine something that happened in Stockholm in 1992. That would be, for the dead me, would be much less interesting than the new point of view.
I just want to say thank you. I'm blown away by the generosity of the spirit of Maestro Salin, and also Ross. It's this far exceeded my expectations of how much we would get to see and learn and actually understand. And I'm extraordinarily grateful and appreciative. Thank you. You guys were wonderful.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you. All right.
So Anne, you had a question for Ross.
Hi, Ross. I don't know too many conductors who probably at a very young age have mastered a percussive instrument, a wind instrument, a string instrument, and now you've turned to voice. Did you wake up one day and just say, hey, I've got Beethoven's Ninth all figured out. I just need a few more of me, and I'll take up conducting and find an orchestra. You just have such at a young age very impressive resume already. But what was it that kind of really drove you to focus on conducting?
Well, first of all, thank you. Much appreciated. Yes, about me doing a lot of things, I don't like it when I'm bored. I never like to be bored. Keep myself busy. But what drove me to be a conductor? There was this Finnish conductor during the lead course that he said that every conductor has that kind of attitude towards conducting. When they see another conductor, they get that, oh, I could do this better. But I never had that. But I saw other people conduct, and I got inspired by that. My mom and dad are violin makers, so naturally we have a lot of musicians at our house when I was growing up. And there was this cellist conductor who came to fix his cello. And me being a 14-year-old kid, I walked up to him confidently and asked him to teach me. And then it took me about 2 weeks. And then I got that snap. And then I realized that this is just what I want to be doing, and this is much more than what I thought it was going to be. And then, yeah, snowball kept rolling, and now I'm sitting here.
Thank you.
My question, Ross, is actually sort of technical. I know that when I watch a conductor, I understand a conductor has specific gestures that indicate tempo, right? You do this, and there are essentially prescribed patterns that you use depending on the meter and that type of thing. So my question is, are there specific gestures that are well understood to communicate other aspects of what you're trying to achieve, like articulation or dynamics or things like that? Does the other hand do special stuff that is obviously recognizable to the members of the orchestra, or do you have to sort of communicate that individually, every time?
Well, I feel like every conductor has their own way of showing dynamics or articulation or the music, and some could argue that some ways work better than others. But the funniest thing about that is that sometimes when things work, and I'm analyzing a conductor and something works, I don't know why it works, but it works, and it gets the players just enthusiastic. It gets them in the mood. It gets them just on the edge of their seats playing their heart out. But yeah, I'd say that there's definitely certain things that you can gesture with your hands. And what helps a lot is a good understanding of all the instruments. So let's say if you're supposed to be in charge of things, you're supposed to know how each instrument works and how that functions. You can't ask a timpani player to play a certain way, which is physically not possible. So a good understanding of all the instruments kind of helps with the gestures and how you might then ask or show articulation or dynamics.
And I can say, having played in many orchestras with many conductors, that there are physical gestures sometimes that the players don't like. There are ways of being communicated with that they don't appreciate, but it's right.
Like orchestra players universally hate it when you tell them to be quiet like this.
Yes,
that's a big no-no. They will, thank you, goodbye, never come back. That's a big no-no.
Or sometimes string sections, if the conductor tells them to vibrate. I know some orchestras don't like being told to vibrate.
And a lot of it is it's a lot of people skills, and there's a lot of psychology behind it. And every orchestra is different, and you'll find out the first rehearsal if they liked the shake or the not.
Right.
Especially from say a young conductor is asking for, from the violin section, a certain type of phrasing, but said conductor is not a violinist themselves. So I've gotten a comment back once that, how are you supposed to know how this works? So it's you gotta know your stuff about each instrument before you start telling people what to do.
Right, but there's never a situation in which you're able to say, when I do this, do that to the orchestra. They have to be able to somehow intuit what you mean, right, without you explicitly describing what the gesture means.
That's the goal.
Yeah. Okay.
I feel like if you don't achieve that, you're doing something wrong.
Okay, great, thank you.
It would be such a delight to watch Ross conduct in person, and I'm just hopeful that somewhere in the not that far away future that wherever you are, we'll find you. But it would be a joy to watch you perform. Thank you.
Thank you. Fingers crossed.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so
Be
much.
well.
Amazing. Bye-bye.
Happy holidays.
Thanks. Stay well, everybody.